everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the Charlie Chats Footy podcast with me, Charlie Casson. Thank you for listening. Firstly, I'd like to give a massive shout out and a thank you to Jack Rankin, Marley Smith and Nikki Jacobs for their wonderful donations and becoming official patrons of the podcast. If you want to get involved and you want to find out more about it, the link's in the description of this episode. Have a read, and if you can help in any way possible, I'd be forever grateful. I just want to start by saying I am absolutely buzzing because Barnet are in the playoffs and the dates have been announced this week. So we've got Yeovil away a week tomorrow, Saturday the 18th of July, 3 o'clock. It's on BT Sport. If anyone wants to see the best team in the world, try and make it into the Football League. This is a long shot, but I would absolutely love to have a Yeovil fan on for a little bonus episode next week. So if you're listening right now and you're an actor, musician, chef, DJ, artist, writer, any sort of creative, and you're a Yeovil fan or you know someone that's a Yeovil fan, please get in touch. Up the bees. This week I am joined by a very special guest. He is a radio and television presenter. He is Max Rushden. Max is the current host of the brilliant Football Weekly podcast brought to you by The Guardian. It was an absolute honour to have Max on. I spent the best part of 7 years watching him every Saturday morning on Soccer AM. So to have him alongside me on my podcast chatting about football was definitely a moment. In this episode, we chat about Cambridge United's rise up the leagues during the early 90s, how Max got the job at Soccer AM, taking an anvil to a Blue Peter audition, dealing with trolls on social media, the rules of Culverhouse, and finally, of course, I ask him who he would play in a film about their life, any footballer past or present. We also had a chat about retail parks near football stadiums, which we discovered isn't actually spoken about enough. So I want to know what the best retail park you've been to or seen near a football stadium, whether that be for parking, getting food before the game, whatever it may be. What makes that retail park so special? Drop us an email on podcast@charliechatsfooty.com. Slide into my DMs on Twitter @charchatsfooty or message me on Instagram @charliechatsfooty. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, please give it a little rating and a review. It just takes a few minutes and it massively helps. Thank you for listening once again. Hope you enjoy. This is episode 11 of Charlie Chats Footy with Max Rushden. Enjoy. Hello everybody, welcome to the Charlie Chats Footy podcast. I am here with radio and television presenter and the current host of the fantastic podcast brought to you by The Guardian Football Weekly. It's Max Rushden. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well. Also, best known as the voice of Gaviscon, which is my most stable employer, the one that's stuck with me the longest. And, you're never sure if your contracts are going to get renewed, but those, indigestion will never end, will it? And that is a great thing for me.
You're not wrong. Let's go back right to the start. I want to start from the beginning.
Okay.
What is your earliest football memory?
Okay. Do you know what? It's a great question. And it's a question I've asked recently on TalkSport. We've been doing this feature with this charity, Sporting Memories. And I've asked lots of people, what's your first sporting memory? And when they can't recall it immediately, I'm slightly annoyed with them. And now you've... So do you know what? I've got a real vague recollection of, I think, the 86 FA Cup final, which was Liverpool-Everton. Not really knowing what it was, but knowing, my dad sort of putting me in front of the television. I can't even remember him telling me it was football. And this works out in my timeline, I think. My first Cambridge United game was a 2-2 draw with Exeter. And I can never remember if it was in 85 or 86, but it was in one of those years.
So how old were you been then? Six or seven?
Yeah, 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And all I can remember about that is the smell of cigarettes, right? It was not a smoking household that I grew up in. And quite incredible fruity language of people, words that I had never, in our house, there was, I would say, my mum, not a swearer. I was 6, so I wasn't really. My sister must have been 8 at the time. My dad was sort of a bloody hell swearer, but there was no effing and there was no C's anywhere near our house. So hearing those kind of words and just smelling stale cigarette smoke, I think are my first my first real sporting memories. But 86 was, Mexico, Panini 86, the Mexico 86 album was my first Panini album. And sort of got hooked very quickly, I guess without really knowing why.
So why Cambridge?
Well, that's where I was. I mean, I no one's a glory hunting Cambridge fan, are they? Like, unless you really are shit. So my dad was a massive Spurs fan and, grew up watching Tottenham in 50, 51, 60, 61. And when he was a boy at White Hart Lane, they would carry the kids that went to the game would be like carried over the people's shoulders and just sat on the goal line. Basically, you'd just be sat on the touch line. So that's where he watched his football when sort of Tottenham in the sort of 50, 51 years. And so he obviously gave me that love of Tottenham and just watching Glenn Hoddle and Chris Waddle and just, people who just were so beautiful on the football. But he took me to watch Cambridge United, which was a very different education because I think I've been going for about 2 or 3 years. And, when you're young and you go to watch football, you kind of, you're not really watching the game. It's a bit cold.
Yeah.
25 minutes is enough. Then you just start sort of looking around. But I went with 2 of my best friends, Matthew and Clive, who I still know really well now. And, we just sit there because that's where our dads took us. And then sort of 2 years in or 3 years in, John Beck took over. And we just went on this extraordinary run from the 4th division to the 3rd to the 2nd, to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, playing this very rudimentary 4-4-2, knock it long, dirty football, which I didn't know any better. What was interesting was I just thought you won all the time. I had no real understanding that you didn't win every football match you went to.
I've been to the Abbey Stadium about 6 or 7 times in recent years. I've not actually ever seen Barnet win there, which is quite depressing.
Wow. I mean, that is extraordinary because I suspect, I don't go to watch Cambridge United that often, but I reckon I probably haven't seen Cambridge win there in the same amount of time. So that is really unlucky.
Yeah.
I love that you support Barnet.
Yeah, mate. Born and bred, man.
How's Martin Allen doing these days?
He's not been back in about a year and a half.
Okay, so he'll be back in 6 months.
Yeah,
right?
I'll be back soon.
Every 2 years, he does a couple of years, doesn't he?
Well, we've managed to scrape the playoffs on a points per game system, so
it's the dream, right?
There's some good chance that he could come back within the next 2 weeks. I've got a
Who
fear.
Who have you got in the playoffs?
So we've got. So the conference now they've changed it where you have to have an extra quarter final.
Oh yeah, it goes up and up and up and up. I quite like that.
Yeah. So we've got a one-off game against Yeovil away.
Right. Oh, a tough place to go.
And if we win that, we got Notts County in the semi, and then we'll either play in the final against either Boreham Wood, Harrogate, or Halifax. I think.
I just wouldn't look that far ahead.
I know. I know. Although we've beaten Yeovil already this season, and we've beaten Notts County away this season,
okay.
So my hopes are high.
Most importantly, do you love the Abbey Stadium? I imagine as a lower league fan, you will see the beauty in a football ground that you have to walk across a field of cows to get to. Yeah. And the sort of the Corona Cop, the Newmarket Road end.
My earliest memories from the Abbey Stadium when I used to go as a kid, when I was like in my teens, was either parking in the big DFS retail park bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Or the Tesco and getting a meal deal with my dad before walking down. Is it a big Tesco?
So we used to park in Comet, right? And Comet would, because that was the only way they never checked if you went into Comet. You didn't go and you go and get a receipt. It was the safest place to park. But Comet closed at like 5. So by the time you got there, the barrier was down. Me and our mates, we used to hold the barrier up so Fraser's Peugeot could just fit underneath it and we'd get out. But I generally cycled in true Cambridge fashion to the Abbey or walked. And I remember going to a Millwall game, and my dad had stopped going to watch Cambridge in the 80s because of the hooliganism in the early 80s. And we played Millwall and we beat them. I think it was in the FA Cup. It was in the FA Cup and it was really late. And we'd won in extra time where one of their players had scored an own goal from 25 yards, like a dodgy back pass that went in. And we subsequently signed that centre-back. It's classic Cambridge.
Yeah.
But my dad made us run all the way home. Not just run like 5 minutes, get away. Because once you're 5 minutes away, there's not really a big football exodus from the Abbey, even when it's full. But we ran the whole way home because of his memories of what had happened when, I don't know, probably another team had turned up. It's probably not fair on Millwall. But yes, Comet was the place back in the day.
Yeah, there's a big retail park, isn't there? Just a bit further down.
Yeah.
Round the bend towards town.
Not enough podcasts talk about the retail parks near football grounds. This is the sort of niche interest that I actually really do care about.
I remember there's a big retail park next to Bolton as well, when I've been up to Bolton before.
Colchester. Now, Colchester's the most soulless, the Western Homes Community Stadium. And Layer Road was fun, right? But it's, when you get older, you start thinking about practicalities much more. It's really accessible to the A12. You know, you can get a McDonald's, you can be back on the motor, you can be, only be 2 hours, you can just be miles away within minutes. It's really well designed.
I think you can see the McDonald's from the ground.
Yeah, which is actually more tempting than the football that is on offer generally.
I've had a few bundles behind the goal in that away end. Like you said, you do have to walk through a farm-ish thing to get there. How has that ground changed at all from when you was a boy?
Well, I mean, the main change is we built one new stand, and that is, purpose-built, nice seats, comfortable, spacious, and we obviously gave that to the away fans.
Yeah.
But I don't think the rest of it has changed at all. I think there was this big story that when we drew with Man United in the FA Cup. Mm-hmm. Wow. 2015, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was your first year back in League Two, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
2014.
Because of 2014, and we got £1 million from having a replay, right? And there was just a big story that we put in some new urinals, because actually in the old Cambridge dressing room there was just one urinal, and you just think like the whole team are getting ready. I think there's like one cubicle and one urinal for the whole home team. That was sort of like classic. It's not like a set of trees you can wee in before the game, like Saturday football. Just the whole team having to queue up for a wee before because there's only one. But in terms of, I don't think anything has changed really. I mean, they might have painted the seats, but I love it, and there is real talk, and I confess I don't know exactly where it's at with moving to a purpose-built out of town community facility, which is probably really important and it probably matters for the future of the club. But I just think you lose so much soul when you move away from, it's happened to lots of clubs, and
it's happened to us.
Barnet, right? You left Underhill, and I don't know what I've never been to
the Hive
ground, the Hive, but I does it. Obviously over time, kids who don't remember Underhill don't know it, and so it creates its own history. But I would, if I was a multi-billionaire, I would just change the Abbey and keep it where it is, because I just think it just means so much. And
just the fact of being able to, like you said, run home, or we used to walk to Underhill, me and my dad and my brother.
Yeah.
And now it's a 20, 25 minute car journey in the car.
I suppose if you really cared, you'd move house.
I'm not going to lie, I won't be doing that. So you mentioned it a bit earlier. Let's talk about the early 90s. Definitely, I think you'd agree, everyone would agree, the most successful period for Cambridge United. John Beck takes over just after he finished being a player for you. 89, took over in 1990. I want to start with his first season, or his second season. Was it his first season or second season you won? First season. First season, you win the Division 4 playoff final, which is now League 2.
Yeah. First ever one at Wembley, right?
First ever one at Wembley. Yeah. And your first promotion in 12 years. A young Dion Dublin scoring the only goal. I know you had a good run in the FA Cup that year as well. You got to the quarters against Palace, didn't you?
Yeah. So we beat, did we win at Wolves, I think, in the third round? And then we had Bristol City. Then we had Millwall in the fourth round. We drew at the Den and we took them back, and that was the game I ran home from. Then we had Bristol City in the fifth round, and we went to Ashton Gate on the coach. And I think I'm not sure if I'd ever been to an away game before, or I'd never seen a stadium as big as Ashton Gate. That was like sort of mind blowing how big that was. And we were right up in sort of the corner on the side, and Chris Ledbetter was clean through, and John Bailey pulled them back and only got a yellow card. It was a terrible decision. And we drew the first replay after extra time. And then there was a toss of the coin as to where the second replay would be held. And it was at the Abbey, and we won that game 5-1. And it was just unbelievable. Lee Philpott scored this volley, which is just absolutely, you can see it on YouTube, this sandy pitch, just proper long ball football. Philpott scored, we won 5-1. And it was just, It was brilliant. We played Palace in the quarter-final. And everyone remembers the semi-final that Palace played in, right? When they beat Liverpool 4-3 and Alan Pardew scored that goal. It was an unbelievable game for Crystal Palace. But we were better than Palace in that quarter-final. I mean, I may have rewritten this memory in my mind because it was a long time ago. But, Jeff Thomas, who I now, I don't particularly know him, but our paths have crossed. And if he ever tweets anything, I just tell him off. But, he's so well known for that chip he tried for England. With his he was left-footed and it went, it didn't work out for him. But it was the only shot he ever had with his right foot in his whole career, and he totally mishit it, and it left John Vaughan wrong-footed. And really, Cambridge should have been in that semi-final. But it was a weird. What's weird is we played really long ball football, right? There are so many stories. John Beck put billboards with the word quality in amber and black in the corners of the pitch, so our fullbacks could just look up and just ping the ball to the word quality. He put like buckets of sand in the corners of the pitch so the ball would just stop. So the whole idea was you knock it long, you get a throw in, you get a corner, you fill the box, you take a long throw, win the flick on, you win the second ball. The whole idea, he sort of looked at it quite scientifically. He was just like, at that level of football, if the ball is in their penalty area or up the other end, more often than it isn't, you will just get chances because people make mistakes. I guess it's exactly the reverse of what Pep Guardiola does, right? Which is actually, if you play it out from the back and keep playing out from the back, you will make mistakes. But once you learn and you beat the press, then you're through. And you don't shoot from outside the box because statistically you're unlikely to score. You tick-a-tacker it in. And the Cambridge philosophy was, none of you are good enough, so just whack it as far as you can and just run after it. But within that, we had some really good footballers. You mentioned Dion, who went on to play for England and was a really cultured player and could play centre-back or centre-forward. And, anyone who's played at any level knows changing position on a pitch really is just totally different game. And Dion could do that. Steve Claridge, lots of players who went to play in the Premier League, like Alan Kimball and Liam Daish. And
how good was Dublin at that age? Was he 19, 20 when he...
19, 20. I mean, it's interesting. At the time, he played alongside John Taylor, who's our record-ever goal scorer, who went away and came back. And I think, Taylor was much more experienced and, from a sort of naive 8-year-old looking at it, I thought Taylor might have been better than Dion, but they worked really well together. And there are just a few little touches that he had that made you realise he was a really good footballer. And there's something, you might have had this, I'm trying to think of an example where Barnet have sold someone, Doogie Friedman, maybe, And you feel a weird sense of pride, don't you? Like when we sold Dion to Manchester United for £1 million, it was just extraordinary. It was so, I honestly felt so proud. Not that I'd done anything, but I felt this just overwhelming sense of pride. And whenever he got on the pitch for United, and he was unlucky because he broke his leg and then they signed Cantona, right? But whenever he played and when he got picked for England, honestly, I can't tell you the sort of reflective honour that I felt that there was Dion. And it's very strange because obviously sort of years and years later, I remember one day, during the Soccer and Glory years, I was driving over to Helen Chamberlain's house to film, some advert or something. And then Dion rang me and said, look, I'm getting that team back together, the 1990 team, for a charity game. Do you want to come and play for us? Right. And you just sort of think, how has my life got to the stage where I am walking into a dressing room, introducing myself to all these guys, Fedson, Kimball, Vaughan, Daish, Chappell, Wilkins, Philpott, and they're all like, oh yeah, they sort of know who I am. This is, if you transported the 10-year-old me to there, I would have just not, honestly, just think, now it's not many people's dream to play with that selection of footballers, right? But it was mine, and it was like, what an amazing moment, because they gave me so much joy when I was growing up. And also, if I hadn't gone to watch them, then when I'd sat in that meeting with the head of Sky Sports without knowing what he wanted and just chatted about Cambridge United for an hour, I wouldn't have had that sort of, just a conversation like this one is now, just chatting about those years at Cambridge United. And if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have got that job. And we wouldn't be talking right now. You know,
it sounds ridiculous to anyone else, but because we support lower league teams, but when you're like young and watching them and they're so close to you and they're on the pitch and they're your heroes, they are like your celebs and you're starstruck by them. And I get the exact same thing. I completely get it.
Yeah, they are. When I was 10, like Michael Cheetham was Leo Messi, right? and like to young people, YouTube was not a thing. There was no way, like, you'd heard of Real Madrid or Barcelona, but you never ever saw them play football, like, ever. Especially when I grew up, there was the European ban as well. So like in those really formative years, English teams didn't play in Europe. So yeah, it was only World Cups, right? Which were these sort of totally mystical things, like utterly, like these footballers from these other countries that existed. And, it was that was a sort of totally wild, like, foreign thing that you didn't realize. And so it meant that, most of your consumption of football, most of mine was watching Cambridge. And they were my heroes much more than any musician or actor or anything.
Well, especially as well after what they've achieved as well as an 11-year-old, 10-year-old boy, like watching this Cambridge team doing what they were doing. The following year, you then win League One, right? Which was Division 3.
Yeah, we won the league. I remember we played a game. I can't remember who we were challenging. I think it was Southend, who came up with us both times for the title, and I might have got this wrong. And I can't remember if we won or we lost at home, but I remember the guy over the tannoy announcing that they'd lost, and that meant that we'd won Division 3. And we got to the quarterfinal of the FA Cup again.
Yeah. Who did you have in the quarters that year?
We had Arsenal at Highbury, who were the champions, and they went 1-0 up. Kevin Campbell scored a header, and then at the start of the second half, Dion scored. And it was sort of Dion scored, but Tony Adams, it flicked his head and it looped over Seaman and it went in. I think it was Seaman anyway. And honestly, we scared them. Like, we absolutely scared them. And there were these two Arsenal fans sitting in front of us in the Cambridge end because they couldn't get tickets in the Arsenal end. And they were like, it was all very fun chat. Sort of, they were like, little sort of farmyards. Like, Cambridge is not a farm, right? Like, if you're an Arsenal fan, you sort of think it is. It's like,
apart from when you need to walk into the away end.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
And so we really scared them. And actually, in that game, John Taylor was clean through, and David O'Leary pulled him back. Once again, not a red card. It's a scandalous decision. And then I think Tony Adams scored. The ball sort of bounced off his head and off the bar like 5 times and went in. It was such a heroic defeat. And I don't know if you feel this as a Barnet fan, that actually a lot of my favourite games, I would have that down as my favourite game, because there's something about being heroic in defeat, which I think really, like, football fans can really empathise with. Yesterday was however many years since that England-Argentina game where Owen scored and Solskjaer had that goal disallowed, and just that sort of pain, but there's a heroic pain. I remember after losing to Arsenal at Highbury and, singing The User Going Up, and then we did win that league. I was just like, that was a really brilliant moment. But at the same time, I was sort of thinking, well, we won that league, we'll win this league. And then the next year we got into the playoffs.
And you were top till Christmas, weren't you?
Oh, man. We how the memories...
So this is the championship. This is not the championship now.
We're now in the championship, Division 2 as it was then. And this must have been 91, 92, right? And your mind plays tricks on you. For years, I believed I was at Portman Road to see us beat Ipswich and go top of the league. I wasn't there. Like, I've worked out I was not there. But, like, I've definitely thought I was there. Steve Claridge scored the winner. And I can remember I wasn't there, because I can remember, I think 5 Live had that as their commentary game. And once again, I hope this is true, but I have no idea. But in my mind, I can remember David Pleat summarising, going, well, look, if one of these teams is going to get promoted to the Premier League, it's going to be Cambridge United, or words to that effect. And we just ran out of steam. We just ran out of, we went to Newcastle at some point, and they equalised in the 94th minute. We won 2-1. We scored a goal against Middlesbrough away, and it was disallowed for no reason. And just those little moments.
Fine margins.
Fine margins. And then we played Leicester in the playoffs, and we drew 1-1 at home. I didn't go to the away leg, and they absolutely hammered us. And that was it. And then I think we sold Dion that year, and we sold John Taylor to Bristol Rovers and brought in Devon White, which was just not a good piece of business. And then I think the next year we suffered a couple of injuries really early on, like first game of the season. I think Richard Wilkins broke his leg or something. It all just went wrong. I think Beck got sacked that season, I think.
It's just going back to that. It's like a football manager like hack / edit. Like, I mean, you've gone from League Two to being top of the Championship and nearly getting promoted. And if you'd got promoted, you would have been found the members of the Premier League, right?
Yeah. And what's like, it's a great story still. But what's so frustrating, I guess, is look, you have to dream as a football fan, but we're not getting to the Premier League ever now.
Yeah.
And just to have had 1 year, and you never know, right? You're in there for 1 year. We would have had some games, you know, that we would have won one game that we shouldn't have won, you know, and we would just have those memories, and we'd have, you know, they'd have had to put Cambridge United v Wimbledon on Sky, and that would have been brutal, you know. And actually, the Wimbledon story is not dissimilar, right? They made it. I think they did it in. They went 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st in like it took them 5 seasons or something, or 4 seasons. But I guess their story is the ultimate version, right? That they managed it and they held their own in the top division as well for quite a few years. But it is wild to think that we were that close.
Do you remember thinking we're going to be there? We are going to be a Premier League team.
Well, I didn't know what the Premier League was, I guess, because it didn't exist then.
Yeah.
But the first division, I don't know. I think we got so used to winning and just beating teams and just finding it easy to win. You know, I remember going to Watford and just hammering them, and it just being like, well, this is easy, isn't it? You know, like you just go and you win football matches. And I mean, it's hard to know if it was like just the tactics. People just were not used to playing against that kind of team, right? Never got it down on the ground, which ironically, John Beck was a really cultured footballer when he played. And, you know, a lot of League Two, Division 4 football was, you know, hit the channels, but they would try and find the centre mid if they could. And we just didn't bother with that bit of the game. Or that we just had actually a really good set of footballers within that system. But I don't know if I can't remember if I sat there thinking we're going to, I probably did. I just, you know, I was so consumed with football, like my whole bedroom was just shoot and match posters of anyone. It didn't matter who. I just stuck everything up and, you know, just throwing a sponge ball against my wall and doing headers and volleys and just playing football, like either playing football or playing Kick-Off 2 or Sensible Soccer or playing Championship Manager. That was essentially all I did. You know, there was nothing else in my life.
What I can't get my head around is how Beck took you from League Two, back-to-back promotions to the Championship, almost got you to the Premier League, finishing 5th, obviously losing the playoffs like you mentioned. The following season, he gets sacked in the October, I think it was, or the November.
Was it that soon?
I think so.
I mean, football it's interesting. Barney Ronnie wrote a piece about Liverpool winning the league, and his main thrust of it was that, you know, it's so rare that you get all the right people in all the right places. That if a football team manages it, because almost no team has that ever, right? So Liverpool have the manager in the right place, the sporting director in the right place, the owners in the right place, you know, all the people around and the scouts in the right place, the players in the right place, right? And then there are lots of football teams who have spent millions and millions who don't even have the players in the right place, let alone, you know, looking up and looking in the boardroom and looking behind the scenes. And so I guess at the time, I don't know if it was the right or the wrong decision, but I think we just really got found out. And once teams work out how to play against that, we just didn't have a plan B at all. So maybe our owners were at the time, or the chairman was, whoever it was it Reg Smart? I'm not sure. Maybe he pulled the trigger too quickly, or maybe that was just, we all knew that the time was up.
Because you went down that season.
We went down that season because we lost 2-1 away at West Ham, and we went 1-0 up, and we lose 2-0 maybe. But we scored, but Kevin Bartlett was ruled offside, but he wasn't interfering with play. I know I shouldn't have these things so ingrained in my mind. And he wouldn't have been given offside now because he was just, he was like, Chris Ledbetter, put it in the bottom right-hand corner. Bartlett's miles away. But, you know, big teams get all the decisions. West Ham fans won't like hearing that. But, you know, it's all relative, isn't it? And so that was really frustrating because, we went down and down, and we just never really you know, we had a tiny little upswing with Roy McFarlane was manager in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we had John Taylor came back and we had some good players, Martin Butler and Trevor Benjamin. And that was quite nice. And a guy called Alex Russell who took a great free kick. But yeah, we have never, and, you know, barring some amazing amount of investment, like, you know, we are not ever going to get that close again.
Couldn't even begin to imagine Barnet getting back-to-back promotions, being in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup twice and being...
To have that at 10 and at 9, 10, 11.
Yeah.
Right?
You must have just thought Cambridge were the best team in the world.
Yeah, well, it gives you this total full sense of what football is going to be. I guess I was kind of lucky that I had 2 years of just, this is boring. Before, like, I wasn't 7 when it started, I was 9. And I suppose that is your really formative years. I was aware that you could just draw and lose to Mansfield. You know, like that was a possibility in my existence before the glory happened. But yeah, it's funny because it obviously was so important. And I wonder, I guess, if that success hadn't happened, I'd like to think that I'm such a purist and I love football so much that it wouldn't have affected my entire life path. But, you know, it really cemented going because it was fun because you won. And then you got on Match of the Day, or you got in Shoot magazine, or you, like, whenever you were mentioned, you know, I'm sure you had this growing up as a Barnet fan. If ever Barnet got mentioned in the national press, when you were a kid, when it was like, you know, Shoot had 442 had one to watch Carlo Corazin, and I'd be like,
oh my God.
Wow, this is amazing. I'd read it over and over again. And now I think working in it, you just blithely mention, you know, Gillingham because you do.
Yeah.
And then you don't think, wow, there's a 10-year-old Gillingham fan going, we just got mentioned on the radio, Dad. But that's what I was like.
My version of that, without a doubt, is Edgar Davids.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, my God. It was
How funny is that,
It
man?
was just mental. When it first got announced, I was like, this is a wind-up. And then you go to the Underhill, because he was there on our last season at Underhill. And he was our centre mid. Edgar Davids is our centre mid.
Was he good? Was he good?
He was good. He got, correct me if I'm wrong, Barnet fans, but I think he got 6 red cards in his first 2 seasons.
That's brilliant.
But do you know the story about what he did?
What number did he have? It was like 0 or something.
So he had number 1. So what happened was he first came in as, in our last season Underhill, he came in as managing director. He then made himself assistant manager. He then made himself the manager. He then made himself player manager. He then made himself captain. And then he made himself the number 1.
Brilliant.
And there was a rumour as well, and you could actually hear it sometimes at the Hive. He made all the other players call him Mister.
I should hope so.
So when on the pitch,
but like who sits there at the Barnet hierarchy and goes, do you know what would be useful for us to get us out of the conference or wherever we were? Edgar Davids. Yeah, that fits. It's like we I think when we were in League 2 and really struggling, we brought in Claude Leroy and Hervé Renard. And like some people will recognise both those names. They've both been really successful in AFCON, in the Africa Cup of Nations. But like, where does winning the African Cup of Nations with the Ivory Coast or Cameroon or whatever, how is that going to help you on a cold Tuesday night, you know, like away at Exeter? It just isn't. It's just like football owners, and this happens at every level of it, get turned by like, and it's not even like a name that Cambridge fans have gone, oh my God, we've got Claude Leroy. Everyone's like, hang on, I just need to Google, he's done what? What's he doing here? Why on earth why does he want to be here anywhere? Anyway, you know, like Arena is, and forgive me, I can't remember the nations that he's won the African Cup of Nations with, but like he is a celebrated hero in like countries in the world, and yet, you know, in Cambridge, it was like a joke because we were like, this just doesn't, there's no logic to this at all. Getting Edgar Davids, that's not going to help. You know, John Still's going to help Barnet. Edgar Davids isn't. You know, it doesn't mean John Still should be in the, you know, the Hall of Fame of great footballers like Edgar Davids should be. But it's round pegs in round holes, right? Davids, not it for Barnet.
The most surreal thing, though, was I went to Salisbury City away, December 2013, and he got sent off at Salisbury and we lost 3-1. And that was like, right, this is ridiculous now.
But imagine what he must have been thinking.
Yeah,
You
I
think
know.
about the games that Davids has played in.
Well, he didn't go up north. He didn't go up north to games.
Did he not?
Accrington, he didn't turn up.
Really? When you say he didn't turn up, what, he just wasn't there?
He
Or
just
like
didn't
he
go.
had an injury or...
He just never travelled. He never I don't think he travelled anywhere further than the Midlands.
But didn't Davids play in that, 95 Ajax Champions League winning team?
Yeah, he won the Champions League.
That unbelievable team that they had.
Yeah.
With Kluivert so young and if you're Edgar Davids, then you're looking around Salisbury going, what am I? How has this happened?
I know.
We've all had falls from grace, right? But that is you're going, what am I doing here?
Yeah. Oh God, it was a funny time. Speaking of the conference, 2005, 35 years in the Football League, you get relegated, making room for, I've got to say, the Barnet boys after we won the league and went in the opposite direction.
Many congratulations.
We both know what the conference is like. I actually sometimes quite enjoy it down there. What was the conference like for you? Because that was your first experience in non-league.
Mm-hmm. I think it, without sounding like, a really bad fair weather fan, it kind of coincided with moving to London, playing Saturday football regularly in London, which I played for the same team since about 2003, but started playing regularly 2005 and still clinging on for the same team. It kind of coincided with me just going less. And the thing about football at that level, League One, League Two conferences, if you don't go, you don't know who's good and who isn't, who can't kick it, who can, who's fat, who's thin, who's only got a left foot, etc., etc. And if you don't have that direct connection, you sort of lose an affinity, not an affinity with the club, right? It's always there. You always love it. I love talking about the 90s. And I don't just love talking about the great years. I'm really happy to talk about Hacken Hayrettin and John Rattle, and they might have been all quite good. I can't really remember, but if you don't go, then you kind of lose that. So I'm a bit of a plastic fan now, if that's possible, of a club in the middle of League Two. So I didn't go to that many games when we were in the conference. I quite liked going to, what's that one in Southeast London? Welling, is it?
Welling, yes.
Welling, it must have been where they let you bring a Chinese takeaway into the ground, and you could stand at the back of the stand and just watch the buses go by if the football.
Yeah, that's Welling.
Really shit. Yeah. I really liked there's a charm to that, and I suppose there's no massive difference between being in the conference and being in League Two in terms of the football you consume, except I guess you can watch the Football League show or whatever channel it's on now at 1 a.m. if you haven't gone to bed yet on a Saturday night. But I losing the playoff final 2 years running was gutting, right? But in the first year of Soccer AM, Cambridge played Torquay in the playoff final. And so for me and Helen, and for the show and how it sort of seemed scripted, that was great. It was gutting to lose it. And to go up, which was against Gateshead, to be 2-0 up, and then Ian Miller, our centre-back, broke his leg or broke his ankle, and Gateshead scored, and there was 10 minutes of injury time, and I lost my voice, the stress. If they'd equalised, they had John Oster pulling the strings.
Oh, John Oster,
in centre mids, and we would definitely have lost. And that it felt so important to get back into the Football League.
Yeah, came at the right time.
Well, I guess it did, but then now you're in the Football League and you're basically doing nothing in mid-table in League Two. It's it doesn't really make any difference to my love of the club. You just sit there going, we've lost to Port Vale 3-0 on the opening day. Roll on 2021-22 season or whatever.
It's weird because, like you meant, like I said about the conference, you go down there and it's actually when we first went down there, it's fun, like you said, you go to Welling, Sutton, Hyde, all these ridiculous teams you would never get to go to, and it's just fun, for the days out and stuff. But then when you sit back and think, right, yeah, the Football League is where we need to be.
But I guess it's it's Premier League teams who go down for one season and they have away trips that they're not used to for the match going supporter to go, let's see what it's like going to, and everyone uses Barnsley as the example, so I'll use it. Let's see what it's like going to Oakwell. This is a bit more gritty than a trip to Stamford Bridge or whatever. But you only want to go for 1 year and then go back up and then establish yourself again. I guess it's the same, right? I want us to be in the Football League because then, I want us to have cup runs. I want us to get in the playoffs one year. I want us to get into League One, and you never know. You get the right manager with the right players at the right time, and you never know. But I mean, it's harder and harder for teams, let's face it, with no real football, with no fans. Right?
Yeah, no, you're right.
If we're really honest with ourselves, to get anywhere.
Just quickly, I want to touch on rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the team that, like, because obviously, you know, there's big rivalries in football, but with Cambridge, who is the team? Is it Peterborough? United. Still is it?
Cannot stand them.
It's still Peterborough.
Horrible people, terrible place. I remember like there was a real rivalry when we were like, for a few years we were better than them, and you know, there was I remember cycling, me and my mate Clive cycling to Cambridge v Peterborough. We must have been like 10, and we're on our bikes, and this really horrible man, like Peterborough fan, running up to us going, "You going to football? Where's the firm going to be?" I said, "Why is he asking us?" Like these two. My mate Clive went, "We just go to Sainsbury's, like we're in full Cambridge scarf, hat, everything," and he's like, "All right." But yeah, that is the real kind of, like, it's not a pleasant rivalry. I mean, they probably don't care about us anymore, which is even more depressing, right? But especially now Northampton have gone up, because I think Northampton, when I was growing up, it was like Cambridge and Peterborough hate each other. Northampton want Peterborough to hate them, but they don't care about them. But I think now it's probably Peterborough and Northampton will have a bit of a rivalry, because you kind of want to have one, but there isn't. But like, I guess we're just not as good as them at the moment, which is really sad. But yeah, I don't like them. I don't like them, and I'm happy when they lose. Just quickly,
I want to talk about Soccer AM, right? I want to ask you something, just because,
please.
From an actor's perspective. So, Soccer AM, obviously you took over from Andy Goldstein, who had a year just before you. But when Tim Lovejoy left, it was a pretty big deal at the time.
Huge deal in a tiny sort of bubble.
It was because, you know, my generation, we grew up on that. I just want to know, like, the process, like how do you get that job? Because as an actor, we go to auditions, we have screen tests, we have chemistry reads, we have all this sort of thing. With Soccer AM, are you approached? Do you apply? Do you have to go for a coffee with Helen to see if she likes you? Like, what? How does it work? How do you get that job?
It's a good question. I sent a show reel into Sky Sports with no live TV experience. And the only reason I made the show reel was I'd lost the breakfast show at BBC London radio station. And I was like, you know, I was 28, and I was like, I've got to get on with things. And I'd always put off making a show reel just because, you know, not laziness, just sort of, I just never got round to it. And then I lost that show, and I was like, come on, I've got to, you know, that was you know, you want your career trajectory to be constantly going up, right? And that's obviously not how it works. But I made the show reel, I sent it to everybody, and everybody ignored it. So I sent it to BBC Sport, ITV Sport, Channel 4, Eurosport, everyone. 2 people replied to me. The Travel Channel, who said I was boring. I mean, literally, the Travel Channel was 2 weeks in Mallorca will cost you £450, all included. Like, how boring do you have to be? That is next level boring, right? And Sky Sports, this guy called Andy Melvin, rang me, and he was the number 2 there. And I went in. I remember a girl that I worked with at BBC London going, "Wow, you're meeting Vic and Andy. Like, these people don't meet everybody." But I didn't know who they were. I didn't really do enough research on them, which is lucky, because I just was sort of like, hey, look, there's that 10-pin bowling competition, or like maybe some voiceovers of the power boat racing or something, like whatever. And I went in, I sat down, and we chatted literally like we have about Cambridge United in the 90s for about an hour. And then they said, "Look, what do you think of Soccer AM?" And I said, "Oh, look, yeah, I've always watched it. I sort of grew up watching it." I mean, 08 to 15 is known as the glory years. That's a coincidence that they were the years. So literally, we chatted about Soccer AM, and I'd been a fan of the week in the Luther Bissett's stand in the year 2000, right? I was like, me and my mates went down. I got in touch with the show. I always liked that. You know, I'd love fantasy football with Badil and Skinner, and it was sort of very derivative of that, I guess. And so the bosses of Sky Sports are going, okay, he's a proper football fan. He supports a rubbish team. You know, that gives you credibility. He was a fan of the week on Soccer AM. It's like ticking these boxes. He knows the show. And they said, all right, well, look, we'll give you a call. We think we've got something for you. Give you a call in a couple of months. And then a month later, the producer of Soccer AM said, do you want to go for a coffee? So I went, yeah, sure. And we sat in a Cafe Rouge in Chiswick and chatted about football. And I was like, maybe they want like an out, like a reporter, like, out and about guy. I used to do that on the radio a lot, in the radio car, just sort of being a dick. And then like a month later, they just like, I got a call from the head of Sky Sports, and he just said, look, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, well, I've got an audition for Blue Peter, which is ridiculous. And I did. So he was like, look, can you get in before that? And I was like, sure, yeah. So I got up really early and I got the train down to Sky. And I woke up in the morning and there was like the instructions for the Blue Peter audition said, like, bring a prop that represents your life, right? It's a ridiculous question. Isn't it? No one has a prop that represents their life. But anyway, years ago, a mate of mine had sent me an anvil in the post. We just thought it'd be funny for a postman to have to deal with an anvil being in the post, right? So I put this anvil in my bag and I went to Sky. So I literally had an anvil in a bag, and I took it to Sky. I sat down and I just put it on the floor. And the head of Sky Sports said, I want to talk about Soccer AM. I said, yes. He said, would you like to do it? And I was like, yes, please. And he went, if you get Blue Peter, what are you going to do? I said, well, I hope that means you give me £1 million, but I'll do this. He went, I was hoping you'd say that. He said, what other work are you going to do? I said, look, I'll just do Soccer AM. So, make it so good you give me the second year. He went, I'll give you a 2-year deal, right? So there's literally no audition, no screen test, no pilot, never met Helen, anything. And I'm sitting there going, so like my brain is like exploded, okay? Like I was just like blood rushing to head. And he was like, look, don't tell anybody, please, because obviously they had to tell Andy that he wasn't going to be doing it. And I was like, okay. And then we had sort of like 20 minutes of small talk about, I think Dean Windass had just scored that goal for Hull against Bristol City.
Playoff final, yeah.
And then I was like, oh God, I didn't really see the game. And I was like, oh God. And then I'm just like, I've got to get out of here, right? I've just got to get out before he realizes that he's made a terrible mistake, or like,
yeah.
So I was like, my head is just absolutely screwing. And then I just kind of signed with an agent. So I walked out of Sky, and I didn't want to negotiate. Literally, I'd have done it for £1. Like I had no idea what I should be paid to do this job. I said, look, I'll let him discuss that. So I rang my agent. I said, look, he's just offered me a 2-year deal. Do I have to go to the Blue Peter audition? He was like, yeah, of course you do, because until something's signed and totally agreed, and you just don't know it's official, right? So I went to the Blue Peter audition, and that was weird because I was already greying at 28, and everyone else in that audition room was like, and I'd never done an audition in my life, like ever, for anything. And that was like 5 25-year-old girls, 4 23-year-old boys. Everyone looked like they'd just drunk like 6 litres of Sunny Delight. I was like this 29-year-old greying bloke who just got the job of his dreams. I was not remotely, I wasn't bothered about being there at all. And so I was the only one who was really relaxed. They all had like photo montages of their life for their prop, and I'm sitting there holding an anvil. So like that audition went really well because I didn't really care. And so they asked me to come back for like the final 3 audition for Blue Peter, and I sort of said, no thanks. And then my agent sort of texted me during that audition to say, look, this is the deal for first year, second year. And I'd never really earned any money in my life. And it was, it was like the first time I'd been like paid like anything significant. And that was just like a complete head fuck, honestly. So that evening I'm like out with 3 of my best friends. In fact, it was Clive, who I went to Cambridge United with. It was his wedding was coming up, and we'd gone to taste the beers that he was thinking about having at his wedding.
Right.
So we're sitting in this pub, and it's a really nice day. I think it is. We're sitting outside in a pub garden. We've had 2 or 3 beers. And then I say, look, I've had a really weird day, lads. and like anybody, I think, who gets anywhere, and it's not all about ability. It's, luck and timing and hard work. And I'd, for years and years been sending off demos to Radio 1 and Capital and blah, 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 and getting close and having pilots at Radio 1 and it not quite coming off. And always like I'd worked, I'd really, really put, like I'd never stopped. Like when I was reporting and at BBC London or whatever, if I was reading the news, I was always trying to get into Danny Baker's show. Like I was really driven to like get something like this. And so in many ways, it sort of depends how you look at it. It was like the timing was extraordinary, right? They and I, look, I think Andy Goldstein did a perfectly decent job there. Like, and I don't know why they didn't want to keep him, and whoever followed Tim, it was going to be tough. And I suppose for me, the timing was amazing, because if I hadn't lost that radio show when I lost it, I wouldn't have made the show reel for a couple of months, and then I'd have sent it in September, and they'd have already had to make a decision, right? So like everything hit at the right time. And then where I was very lucky as well is because Andy had only done a year on Soccer AM, like I was pretty wooden when I started. When I think back, I daren't watch those shows again, but they couldn't change it again. Like they had to persevere with me for 2 years. And once I'd done a couple of years, I sort of felt comfortable and felt confident. And then, that turned into 7 years very, very quickly, actually. And I was pretty unlucky to lose it, really. Like, a new boss came in at Sky who didn't think I was very good. And that is the nature of this business, right? It's the same as acting.
Oh, so that's what happened. You got asked to leave, did you?
I got the elbow, basically. I got moved to fantasy football, which is what Fenners was doing.
You done a straight swap with Fenners, didn't you?
Did a straight swap, yeah. And actually, like, in retrospect, I'm really pleased it happened, because I loved working with Merce. I thought that show was really fun and really interesting, and it was a bit different, So the way I sort of look at it is that A, it completely changed my life, right, and it has afforded me all the opportunities to do the things that I do now.
Sure, yeah.
B, however unlucky I was to lose that show, and I think I was luckier to get it in the first place. So like, you can't just, you've got to take the rough with the smooth, right? You've got to go, well, actually, on the balance of things, it was completely life-changing, right? So at the time when I lost it, I was really frustrated. But actually, with a bit of perspective, you go, do you know what, that's fair enough. And actually, the only regret I have is I, like Fenners now gets to produce it as well, and I never got the chance to, like, be the creative head of it. And, lots of people would think that would be a total disaster, but I'd have liked to have a crack at being in charge of editorial, like, what sketches we do, what sketches we don't do, that would have been really fun. And, there's a guy, Dave Morgan, who like played Ant from Ant and Dec and was the newsreader, and we were really tight, and he now produces Top Gear, right? And I'd have loved to have tried to build the show with him, but like that didn't happen, and that's totally fine.
Do you miss it?
No, not really. Like genuinely, like, it was funny, like the first sort of Saturday of the season was probably a bit weird, also because, like, you're never loved on a show more than when you're not there. So like, for about 3 weeks, Twitter was like, oh my God, I can't believe they've got rid of Max. The whole time I was there, everyone was like, oh, you're useless. Because so I guess that was weird. It was also slightly weird. I was still at Sky, right? So I wasn't going to say anything. I was like, well, look, this is my job now. Let's make this the best it can be. I don't miss it. I'm 40, right? oh no, shit, I'm 41. God, it's depressing. But like, I feel, and it's difficult for them now, I think, because young people, when I was there, right, young people watch telly, and Twitter, social media wasn't really a thing when I started. So that if something funny happened in League Two, the first place you would see it was Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. So all those clips, the third eyes, the layoffs, here's the funny thing from League One, here's something that's happening in Scotland. Like, we sort of had the monopoly on that. Whereas now, there was like a hilarious goal, like hilarious sort of 20 seconds of Sunday League between Swansea and Luton the other day.
Yeah.
And like, that had gone viral before that game had even finished, basically. Like it's a much more difficult show to make now, I think, or you've got to make a different one. So there are bits of it I miss, I think, but I don't, like, I'd never wake up on a Saturday and think, oh, I wish I was going to do that. I mean, I go into TalkSport now on a Saturday, and I love doing that show anyway. I'm not just saying that because you have to say that you love what you are doing right now. But I'd love to do something similar, probably, like a similar sort of style TV show at some point. TV is a much more annoying medium than radio, right? Or podcasts. Like, it just takes so much more time, and there are so many more people to decide what you can and can't do. So to try an idea, it's just intrinsically more difficult. And I find those layers quite frustrating. Whereas on the radio, like, let's try this thing. That's great. People are much more scared of dead air on television.
Yeah.
Like they're just terrified of it. So you can never really, like, it's much harder to push something or try something. Even in Soccer AM, which was like the most kind of chaotic TV show you have, a lot of it's really organized chaos. Whereas on the radio, you go, right, we are now going to try this thing. It might be great, it might not. If it's great, great. And if it's not, you just laugh about it and crack on. And
Do you think that's because on TV you can be seen as well? So you're more, exposed?
I think so. Yeah. And it's just harder to, like, if you want to try something, you need a director to make sure people can see it, right? Real sort of practical things about, like, I think we always felt with Soccer AM, like, it was live, right? Which was brilliant. And live is always the best. But, like, you'd be compared to the Graham Norton show, right? And you'd be like, but like, we're doing 3 hours live with a footballer from the Championship, like an unknown actor in an indie band. Graham Norton's doing 2 hours and they're cutting it into 45 minutes. And he's got Tom Cruise, Bono and Al Pacino. Like that's not a fair comparison, right?
Yeah.
Well, they could try things or it didn't work. Or like if you think about something brilliant like Shooting Stars, and it's probably embarrassing to even compare such a brilliant show with what we were doing, they could stop recording and set up some brilliant thing where they're rolling a stuffed bear to Mark Lamar and he's got to stand on a stool and beat it off with a shield. Whereas we've got an ad break to set everything up and it's got to work, because if it doesn't, you can't. Like those sort of limitations, I guess, were what made it really fun and what meant things went wrong. And actually it was most fun when things went wrong. The constrictions of it, I guess, just mean there are more people involved.
Yeah,
or I guess
sure.
I can't just do exactly what I want, because someone might go, there are more people to say, Max, that's a shit idea. I guess that's probably what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely gone downhill. I'll be happy to say that. It's definitely.
Well, but you've got to say what you have. I mean, whether you believe that or not, you've got to remember as well that you are older. And so, like, people, like, there are lots of people who are just like, it was only good under Lovejoy. And you're like, okay, that's fine. Actually, the show is really quite similar from when it first started to what it is now. There are slightly different ideas, but essentially it's a bit...
No more Soccerette.
I've talked about this quite a lot, actually. I hated it.
Yeah.
But I hope I'm not sort of rewriting, like trying to make myself sound better, but I didn't enjoy it. I'm not a lad, right? Like, and I tried to be for a bit, because I was sort of the whole thing overwhelmed me to start with. I was really nervous and I just wasn't myself. Like, for better or for worse, I grew up in central Cambridge and I was in Cambridge County Youth Orchestra, second clarinet. And I've got a degree in modern history. That doesn't mean I'm better or worse than people who came before me or after me. It just means I was sitting there going, I used to be an investigative journalist. What am I doing? Like it makes me cringe, and it should have gone before it did. And like at the time, like when Tim did it as well, the sort of loaded FHM generation was sort of still in existence, right? And it would be, it would be disingenuous of me to just say that I went in and said, look, this is wrong and we shouldn't be treating women like this. I didn't do that. Whether I felt it or not is slightly different. I was too scared and just wanted to be part of the machine, have my contract extended. So I was probably part of the problem as well. But it went within 2 years of me being there. And I think a lot of that was to do with not me standing up for women's rights. It was to do with me being really, really bad at flirting, which existed, which my track record with, trying to chat women up in nightclubs in the early 2000s will pay testament to that. I just wasn't very good at that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting subject, and I think it didn't feel right for what that show was, and it's.
I mean, I certainly feel that when we were there, the jokes we tried to do were in the sketches were not at the expense of the Soccerette. I feel that's what we were trying to do, what I was trying to do. But again, I could be rewriting history. I can't sit there and say I was some campaigner that I probably should have been.
Yeah, fair.
I don't feel I had the power at the time, but that's probably not an excuse.
You said yesterday I could ask you whatever I wanted, right?
Yeah, of course.
What are the rules to Culver House?
They're on the website. You can't, the first rule of Culver House is you can't tell anybody the rules of Culver House. It's once you get it, it makes sense. Until you do, I can understand why it frustrates people and people see it as some sort of big, in thing. But like I've had discussions with senior management at TalkSport and I can't tell them. And that probably is not been good for my career. But you have to have principles.
Have you got any? Who won the last game out of you and Barry?
I won the last game. It was a very quick game, probably the quickest ever. But the week before, I accused him of rebanistering, and he didn't. He Gary Penriced, and I'd like to apologise to everybody.
Oh my god! Oh god! You've got a hit out at the minute, haven't you? Over lockdown?
Yeah, it's going well. Yeah,
in your back garden. How's that going?
Well, it got. If you get retweeted by Lineker, always helps, right? And Gary Lineker and I'm the sort of Poundland Gary Lineker when it comes to tweeting about politics and the EU and matters of consciousness or conscience rather. And it's interesting how many followers you lose when you start campaigning on those kind of issues. He gave it his full support. That really helped, and some other people got behind it. The second single, Your Boufal, the homage to inconsistent Southampton midfielder Sofiane Boufal, didn't go so well, which I was slightly disappointed about because I thought musically that was, obviously, it was a bit heavy James Blunt influence. The third song, Thundering Weapon, was also good, but essentially they are taking Twitter insults and turning them into music.
My favourite lyric from In Your Back Garden being "You've got a face like a melted wheelie bin," which is
that's a good one.
Which is a classic.
I think in Thundering Weapon, the person who calls me Jizz Weasel is pretty good. My favourite of all of them is "I bet you don't eat value beans, you smug twat." But and I don't. I'll be honest with you, and I never did. Right? I can't help it. You can't help where you grew up.
Heinz, it's got to be Heinz, right?
And I was always brought up with Heinz, and I appreciate the privilege that I have in life. But social media and trolls is really interesting. I've always found it. I think what's interesting, I think if it had existed when I started Soccer AM, I wouldn't have lasted, and I'd have found it like cripplingly difficult. But because I felt confident enough as a broadcaster, by the time it really got big, I didn't care. And I saw, and I don't know if every boss I've ever had has told me to not retweet insults and to not engage with them. And, because they think people will believe it. If someone says, "This is you've ruined my life. This is the only 2 hours of TalkSport I don't listen to." And for me, I will on air say, I think it's probably good, because if you're listening for 24 hours a day, every day, then you need A, to sleep, and B, to do some chores, right?
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't be listening to this all the time. So I genuinely don't care. I don't care, but I think there are lots of presenters who are, like most people in the industry, have quite fragile egos, big egos, but fragile ones. And I think I'm sort of on the normal end of the spectrum. Clearly you don't go into this business if you don't have some sort of ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
You sort of have this belief that people might want to listen to what you have to say about something. It's pretty, when you boil that down, that's sort of quite arrogant, whoever you are, like if you're a newsreader or if you're, hosting Strictly or anything in between.
Mm-hmm.
But I find the insults really funny. Like, I just find it funny. Like honestly, literally just this morning, right? And I don't know when this is going out, but last night, Bruno Fernandes scored that really lovely goal for Manchester United. He's a great footballer, right?
Uh-huh.
And Sky tweeted, "Was Manchester United's third goal against Brighton a contender for goal of the season?" Not really. I replied, not really. Like, it's a good goal, but like, it's not as good as Jordan Ayew for Palace. It's not as good as Heung-min Son's, is it? There are loads of brilliant goals this season. So someone called, "Have you ever won the treble? Have you fuck?" So like,
is that his at?
I think that's not his at. That's his like.
Oh, his headline name.
His headline,
yeah.
He went, "How?" So I wrote, "Well, it's a good goal, but it's not as good as lots of other ones this season. Thumbs up." Like, I'm like being nice.
Like, genuine reply.
It's a good goal. It's a nice ball from Matic. It's a nice run from Greenwood. It's a nice finish.
Yeah.
His response was, "The pass by Matic, the run by Greenwood, the cross by Greenwood, the finish by Fernandes, but anything to fit your agenda." Like, who has an anti-Nemanja Matic crossfield pass agenda? Like, that isn't a thing. Who has a Mason Greenwood running at reasonable pace down the line agenda? Nobody has that. Who has a Bruno Fernandes volley, well hit volley, but in the middle of the goal agenda. Like nobody has that. Like I find it fucking hilarious. But actually, because I used to retweet insults all the time, I just find them so funny. Because there's so much bile and hate on social media, I've started muting people. Like over the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I've muted a lot of people. I find that debate, what I find quite interesting is I think there are lots of people who, I think most people understand it and believe in it. Some people don't want to believe in it or refuse to accept it. And there are people who know much more about it and obviously have experience that I don't have, who are now saying, you can't take those people with you. Because part of me thinks if you tweet about Black Lives Matter and then somebody says, what about White Lives Matter? There is part of me that thinks I want to get through to that person, right? I want to try and explain it, and I want to, and like, why the hell are they going to listen to me?
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to lose them by insulting them. But actually, people who are much more learned about this subject are just like, they are not the people to help. They're not the people that are going to be out. They're not the people that are going to make a difference. And so I do mute a lot more. I don't block anyone. I'd rather they shouted into the atmosphere and I never responded. But I have changed slightly on the way I've dealt with it, just as it's become such a toxic place. Because people are looking for a reaction, right? And so if you play into that, then you're probably not
100%
helping things. But I really like those songs are fun, right? I really
they're great, mate. They're really good.
Played them at the live shows on Football Weekly, and they've gone down pretty well. But I genuinely don't care. It's not like I'm not like trying to show like a front. Like you can't get to me, you can't, because most people, like bosses, can just think you're not very good, but it's very rare they actually troll you. Do you know? What I mean? Like it doesn't happen.
It's just fun. It's just a fun, creative way of dealing with it. It's great, mate. They're funny as hell. All right, just to wrap up, I ask all my guests this: stick on your acting shoes, right?
Yeah.
You can choose any footballer, past or present. You can play them in a biopic of their life on the big screens.
Yep.
Who are you going to play and why?
Well, it's a pretty obvious answer, and you've probably had it. I imagine you've had it a lot of times before, but I think people really are desperate for the biopic of Andrew O'Brien, 26 appearances for Republic of Ireland, stalwart of that Newcastle team of the early 2000s, kept Titus Bramble out of that Newcastle team, did well for Portsmouth until Limboy Primus and Sol Campbell, performed a good centre-back partnership. Same at Bolton until Zach Knight and Gary Cahill came in, finished his career in Vancouver. And also because occasionally when he hasn't shaved for a while, people would just say, you look a bit like each other. So like casting wise,
Bob on.
Works perfectly. So, Andy O'Brien, the truth, please.
Any producers out there who are looking to make a film about Andy O'Brien, Max is your man. We got it right here. The people want to see it.
Thank you.
Max Rushden, mate, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on.
No, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you know exactly how much you're going to get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co. podgo.co.